Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my wrap-up video for the 2023 BookTube Prize Finals. We have reached the end of another year of voting in the BookTube Prize, and for the final round, I judged in fiction. I am questionably filming this video without any sort of prep like I did for my quarterfinals wrap-up video, but I figure maybe I'll hopefully be able to let my natural enthusiasm carry me forward. Anyway, the BookTube Prize was started about 5 years ago by Robert and Barter Hordes with the intention of having the literary bookdernet community judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published in the US the year prior to the one the judging is happening. So this year we were reading 2022 releases. I've been an official judge for 4 years now, I guess it is, and I was involved unofficially the first year as well. We start at the beginning of the year after picking a long list in January, then starting in February we have 4 rounds, 2 months apiece of whittling down the long lists into what we have now, where 3 books have medaled in each category or division. But anyway, I was judging for the nonfiction division the first two rounds of the year. So my thoughts for that one is with the nonfiction finals round, I have read 3 out of those 6 books. My favorite was definitely The Escape Artist by Jonathan Friedland, which of the 3 books I read, did the most well in the finals round by making it onto the bronze place, onto 3rd place. So I am happy it medaled and has attention and is prominently featured on the BookTube Prize page. I will link down below. The winner for nonfiction was An Immense World by Ed Yong, which I actually voted for in the long list, and ever since I think I've mostly been hearing people say great things about it, and obviously it's done very well for itself, so I think I should try to read it. It's exciting that a science book made it this far up on the, made first place. Pretty cool. And then we get to fiction, which I read only this round this year, but of course I've read all 6 books on the finals ballot. I did much better than I did with my octafinals ballot, where only one of my top 3 books advanced. This time, 2 of my top 3 books have medaled. So that's pretty cool. Although, I was watching the live show with a bunch of BookTube prizers, a really awesome thing that Robert put together, so I'll be linking that video down below. But a lot of the commentary, I feel like, in the live show was reactionary against the winner of the fiction division this year. So spoiler alerts, the winner of the fiction division is the one I personally put in first place, but I feel like I almost felt like I was supposed to feel basic or something listening to reading some of that commentary, but obviously a lot of people saw something similar to me, and that's heartening too. Although one of my favorite things now about the prize is we can all officially divulge our feelings, and it's just fascinating how much we agree, how much we disagree as judges. But also, even if we do agree, we might find different things to love in the books we ranked. So I'm looking forward to getting to more videos, but first I'll stop rambling in my own and give you my thoughts, going from my least favorite to my most favorite in the fiction finals, giving some context for the way I voted the way I did. And yeah, without any further ado, I think I'm just gonna dive straight into it, starting with my 6th and least favorite book, which is actually the only book I have physically. It is Trust by Hernan Diaz. So Trust is in fact a novel made up of 4 novellas that Hernan Diaz wrote from the perspectives of characters in his fictional world who are creating a sort of backstory for this New York City tycoon and his wife. The tycoon was accused of being a fixer in this world of the 1929 stock market crash. And the point of these stories, which are a fiction book, a ghost-written memoir, a memoir by the ghostwriter, and then the diaries of the wife of this couple, it's about, I think, how we understand history and character, and especially the place of women in stories. But it just did not work well for me. I found, especially the first two novellas, to be pretty turgid, and the introduction to these characters to be wildly uninteresting. And they're supposed to be, these people who, captured the attention of, society. And perhaps they did, especially if, people blamed them for the crash. But I was not at all invested due to the exposition-heavy writing style. And I feel like this read to me like a novel that was written for, the elites, for people who get, fascinated by experimental storytelling and being able to compare things to Edith Wharton, because Diaz wrote a pretend novel when Wharton was writing real ones. I really only got interested when it came to the memoir of the ghostwriter, and I wanted Diaz to write an entirely different story based on this ghostwriter and her father, and their journey from Italy to America, and their experience with being anarchists and their political realities. I thought all of that was much more interesting, perhaps in part because he wrote that in a style that was more dynamic, with dialogue and scenes and all of that. So it just didn't work for me, and I also don't really like how the ending came about. I feel like there's a lot better stories out there when it comes to probing how women are written out of history, or wives are written out of history. For example, you could read The Wife by Meg Wolitzer, or watch the great movie with Glenn Close. So I feel like that did much better with what this book was trying to accomplish. In fifth place, I put Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, which in fact won the second silver, prize medal overall. So I'm very intrigued. I hope other fiction judges, give their thoughts as to why they liked this novel so much. I wasn't necessarily thinking it would get this high. I do know Britta Bowler, I think, liked it even less than I did. So there's that. So I'd be interested to, hear other perspectives. But for me, unlike Trust, I actually was engaged with the characters this time, so at least I can give Trespasses that. It is a book that takes place during the Troubles in Ireland in 1970s, particularly in the area around Belfast. It's a gritty reality where there's acts of terrorism that are constantly popping up, like in the news and in the neighborhood. We are following this 20-something young Catholic teacher named Kushla, who is just trying to kind of make ends meet. Her mother's alcoholic. She has to, get a little extra money from working at her brother's bar, and that's where she meets the most unlikely of companions, a married Protestant man who, to his credit, I think is trying to help out the Irish Catholic youth that are often being discriminated against and are living in impoverished conditions. But ostensibly they start an affair after she is a part of their Irish club trying to teach other Protestants who come from elsewhere, like her lover Michael does, how to speak Irish. And it's an affair that, I don't know, there's a gristliness to the affair too. Like, I feel like Kennedy is, I don't know, not necessarily fully selling me on the affair, because feels like the actual affair is so sort of coarse and sexual, and I'm not sure I'm necessarily buying the romantic aspect, especially since we find out Michael's a serial adulterer, so I'm not sure why this particular affair is much different. I just feel like in general also this book is kind of cantering along. There is a secondary plot as well where Kushla's trying to help a particularly bad off student of hers who is a Catholic boy living in a Protestant neighborhood. And then the plot, comes together in this climax that feels relatively forced to me, and the specifics of how things come around feel like it didn't follow something a little more authentic, and it was sort of high melodrama, just so that maybe something could happen. It kind of felt like Kennedy wasn't sure how to, end things. We were just sort of cantering along for a while, and it's like, okay, how does an ending happen? So just in general, in terms of craft, I felt like it kind of was a bit of a flop for me, but I kind of liked the characters, even though at the same time, the major romance I felt like was a bit, iffy. In fourth place, I put Foster by Claire Keegan, which was a short story turned novella, and that in and of itself was kind of fascinating to me. There's a couple things on this ballot that aren't the, I think, traditional novel length literary fiction, and this is one of them. This is a story that also takes place in Ireland. The protagonist is a young girl who is sent to live with some family friends when her own mother is about to have a baby. She comes from a impoverished farm. They're having difficulties making ends meet, and with that in mind, her parents are, offloading, I suppose is a word for it, her onto these friends who she hasn't met before, doesn't have much of a relationship with. She's very young in a strange environment for the first time. So I feel like stereotypically, you would think it starts as a story where, she feels like she's on the outs and she is out of her element, but through, really deft, beautiful writing, we see how actually this is one of the best things that'll happen to her, because in this environment, her caregivers are taking care of her alone, and they are in a better financial situation, so she's able to get the love and care and attention that she can't get at home. And it's just sort of beautifully and understatedly explored in the novella. And then as time goes on, we do realize that this couple who are taking care of her, the Kinsellas, have a secret about a tragic loss in their backstory, which might lead to why, they particularly feel an affinity to taking care of our protagonist. Other than that, I mean, it's just largely a story where there's not a lot of high drama. There are some, gossipy, mean-spirited neighbors who come in for a little bit, but mostly it's a very quiet, sort of understated story, which, in literary fiction could work, and I feel like overall this worked. But I gotta say that I guess in my head I was still thinking of it as a short story, which is fine, but for something that was as long as a novella, I do feel like it needed a little more oomph. Maybe I'm being biased. I'm mostly a short story writer myself, and I'm currently struggling mightily through the middle section of my novel in progress. And granted, mine is in fantasy, where certainly there's a lot more demand usually for plottier elements. But I just felt like, in a way, this was also a little bit trundling, and you needed something a little more to justify this length, and that otherwise, it's a fine story, but there's nothing dynamic overly dynamic about it. I do wish there might have been a little more exploration about this secret of the Kinsellas and how it fits in with everything, so that, I feel like at the end of the story, you're like, well, that's an interesting rumination on what it is to very briefly live in circumstances that aren't your own, that things are going better for you, and then you can move on from that. But for the novella length, maybe she could have added something a little more in as well to leave a little bit more of a lasting impression. That's my general takeaway. Moving into my top 3 spaces, I put as number 3 Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, which actually that was the one that won 2nd place overall, and Trespasses won 3rd place, so whoops, anyway. But I'm not as far off with this one. I put it as number 3, and in general we put it as number 2. Douglas Stewart feels like sort of a darling of the BookTube Prize. He also did very well with Shuggie Bain. And like with Shuggie Bain, I was very invested in this story. I felt like the characters and the writing were just very engrossing. And it is certainly somewhat similar to Shuggie Bain in that we have come back to Glasgow in the post-Thatcher years, a very working class, gritty environment. We have another alcoholic parent who young Mungo, much like Shuggie Bain, also had to deal with. But I do feel like in this story, at least, you could say that Mungo is the center rather than his mother. And he's this Protestant young man growing up. He has these two siblings who kind of seem like polar opposites in a way, that his older brother Hamish is this gang leader who's just sort of leaning hard into the rough scrabble lifestyle of the neighborhood, and then his sister is trying to leave by, working hard in school and getting an education and actually being able to get to college. And Mungo's the youngest, and he's just sort of trying to survive, I think, and doesn't have much of a sense of himself until he meets James Jameson, who is a Catholic youngster who also lives in the neighborhood. I think James is a little older than him, and they quickly form a sexual attraction to one another. So it's a double whammy in that James is Catholic, and also, they're engaged in a homosexual relationship in a very toxic male environment that isn't so keen on queer culture. That's one storyline. The second storyline takes place several months later when Mungo's mother takes on the services of two of the men in her AA group to sort of man her son off by taking him into the woods for some fishing and that sort of thing for a weekend. And of course, things get a lot more ominous than that. Him just hanging out with these random male strangers on his own for a weekend. And of course, the secondary storyline is able to give us hints about what happened and how things ultimately unraveled in the first storyline between Mungo and James and family clashes. And in that vein, it's a little bit gimmicky, and that type of thing really does turn me off a lot, or at least a little bit. I gotta say, I was just so invested in the writing and the characters, although again, also, I feel like a lot of this is very much misery porn. It's just kind of over the top in a little bit in that way. And there's just, in particular, I think with James's storyline, I just don't like how the gimmickiness of the dual timeline, Stewart used that to kind of be melodramatic and keep the audience in the dark about certain things. So I just feel like there is a little too much drama and subterfuge and gimmickiness with this dual plotlineness, and I felt like at the end, I did feel in the end a little bit cheated about how some of that stuff came together, and that I just wish it might have been a little more straightforward. But otherwise, I mean, obviously, I can tell the staying power of this writer and the way that he's able to bring these types of characters and situations to life. In my number 2 spot, I put How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nakamastu, which is, I would say, the second of the two unusual types of novels, or in this case, I guess, short story collections, which made it to the finals list. And, the fact that it's a short story collection is strange enough. This is also very blatantly science fiction, which is not usually something that makes it that high in the BookTube Prize, but I do certainly have biases as a science fiction reader. It's one of the genres that I do like a lot. And I do think literary science fiction is becoming a thing as I think more literary writers, I suppose, grapple with heady ideas about mortality and the fate of the world, as there's political upheavals and climate change and things like that to deal with. And this story, which spans, I guess, well, technically hundreds of years, tackles a plague. It tackles a little bit of space travel, but it's mostly, I think, in large part how human society deals with matters of life and death. And a lot of the stories center around a plague that's, deeply impacting all of humanity. And the stories are about sort of a death industry that crop up around it, so that human beings can cope with this massive trauma. And in these small stories, it's just beautiful amounts of what it means to be human, with these speculative elements that can take us a little bit out of realism, like a theme park where kids get to, who are fatally ill, get to live out juvenile fun experiences before being euthanized before the worst of their sickness comes on them, and what that does to their families. There's also hotels where people can spend time with the bodies of their loved ones, like for an extended goodbye. And he was able to really handle that, I guess because of the actual character that he's following with the backstory. I felt like that was handled with a lot of beauty and grace rather than too much macabreness. But there are other stories that are less macabre, like robots who are infused with the voices and sayings, like diaries, sort of oral diaries of loved ones until the robots fall apart, and what that does for the people they leave behind. There's also scientists who are trying to harvest organs, and in like another kind of weird take, it's about organs being harvested in pigs who then become more human, and then the ethics of, are we going to be like killing off these humans who are effective new humans. I do think, by the end it's a little bit unwieldy. Frankly, I assume a lot of people might have wanted to do away with the spacefaring stories, although I am fascinated by spacefaring and trying to, put humankind into the future. And there's a wonderful story in here, I think, about a group of people who by that point are, it's a later story, so a lot of these people are connected to other characters from earlier stories, but this group of people are going off into space to explore for a new home, and one of the members is woken up every few years to paint murals of human history and creativity on the walls of the spaceship, and get updates about Earth. And it's just this is the sort of maximist, where is humankind going storytelling that speaks to me. So this might be a little bit niche in a way, and although this book did make it all the way to the finals, it also had a lot of emphasis on Japanese and Japanese American culture, which was nice to read about, and for a diverse set of books to have this culture represented. Yeah, I just feel like the emotionality of what I wanted in these maximist questions were all there, even though I do think by the end it was a little bit too unwieldy in terms of scope. But I couldn't get past how just moved I was in general, so I put the story up at number 2. And that, of course, leaves my number 1 spot, which is also the winner overall of the BookTube Prize for fiction this year. It's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which is her massive retelling of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. For my money, I've not read David Copperfield, so I can't, I don't know how it speaks to me that I'm not comparing it to specifically to that book. But for me, what worked for it is I thought the characters were amazing. The relationships just were so visceral and real. I was highly invested in what was happening. I went in kind of assuming it would be more misery porn, almost like Young Mungo, but instead I felt like the story was infused with a lot of hope, that the parts that had to do with addiction, that for Demon came about due to a football injury, that wasn't really the crux of the story at all. I mean, a lot of it took place more broadly around like his childhood, starting earlier than high school. And there is such a Victorian feel. I mean, I could, sense the Victorian feel to this novel in that it was sprawling, but for me, it just worked. The Appalachian setting, and as I said, the characters were just that engrossing to me that I just kept wanting to keep going with the book. And I found it remarkably uplifting in a way for something that could be so bleak, as Demon did have a mother who was impoverished and dealing with drug abuse. He was in the foster system, which Kingsolver, if she depicted anything with a lot of depression and grittiness, it would be the foster care system and the ways that it fails kids. I feel like she was able to kind of lightly poke fun at, but also, show the real heart in Appalachian culture, which can very often be sort of passed over in terms of how the rest of the country views that culture as sort of, something to ignore. But I think it just came alive and felt really real and three-dimensional to me. I also felt like Demon's voice was enough on its own. She just had such confidence with his witty and just earnest voice that it immediately drew me in. I did also listen to this on audio, so maybe that impacted me as well. I thought it was flying on all cylinders, and I still think a lot about Demon's relationship with Agnes, who was someone who he grew up with as a foster sister, and it was a very deep and touching relationship, or his best friend Maggot, who he knew from childhood, and Maggot's family, who took care of him and came in and out of his life for so much of his life. There was just, I feel like a lot of beauty and human empathy to this book that was about a kid in often such desperate circumstances. And I was glad to spend the time with him. This is the second Barbara Kingsolver book I've read. The last one was decades ago, was The Poisonwood Bible, and that one, if I had to, rate these two together, I would put The Poisonwood Bible as a higher book, but this one also worked well for me, too. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave the Goodreads links for all 6 of these books linked down below now that I'm officially allowed to link to them. Actually, I read Demon Copperhead before the finals started, so that one was already available. But anyway, the other 5 will now be available as well. I am already looking forward to the next year in the BookTube Prize. Robert mentioned putting up a call for judges soon, although frankly, I'm sure he has time to sit that out and wait on it a little bit. I'm sure you've been working very hard, Robert, and deserve a little bit of a break before we start this whole mess up again. But I called it a mess, but actually it is a whole lot of fun. It's very challenging to, stick to the deadlines, but it's expanded my reading so that I read a lot of stuff this year, especially things from across the pond that I probably never would have before, and a lot of nonfiction that I don't often get to as much as I should on my own. And it's great to be able to talk about these books with all of you, so please do leave your thoughts and opinions. And I'm looking forward to, viewing other videos from other judges. In the meantime, I have another wrap-up video I want to make. I read a couple of Jewish fantasy magical realist novels last month that I want to compare and put up here for you on BookTube, so stay tuned for that in the next couple days. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.